Howdy, howdy, it's History with Stevens. We apologize for not getting any videos out recently. So in order to make it up for you, I'm going to tell you two of my famous Laffy Taffy jokes. Laffy Taffy, we're still looking for sponsorships. RC Cola, they were a little upset with our previous videos. So Laffy Taffy, you know the email. So our first joke for today, how many vampires does it take to put in a light bulb? None, because vampires like the dark. Get it? Get it? Alright, next one. What is the best way to keep the water from running? Don't pay the water bill. Alright, let's get on with the history.
Steven.
History with Stephen.
Steven.
In our previous episode, we discussed the different colonial regions, what would become the United States. In this episode, we'll be looking a little closer at what life was like in these colonies. The guiding question for this chapter is, what was life really like in the colonies? Make sure you can answer this question by the end of the chapter. Farming was the main way of life in the colonies. 9 out of 10 colonists lived on a family farm. The homes would usually be just one large room. The family would cook, eat, sleep, all in the same room. Sometimes children would sleep in the attic of the house. Family life was also very busy. Families would wake up very early before even the sun rose to start doing the work around the farm. Chores would include cutting wood, feeding animals, tending crops, building fences, making furniture, gathering eggs, sewing clothes, making candles, cooking, cleaning, caring for babies, and much, much more. The American colonists viewed themselves as British citizens, and thus expected to have the same rights as other British citizens. British citizens had gained their rights through the Magna Carta, the founding of the Parliament, and the English Bill of Rights. Any rights that British citizens held and the colonists didn't would be seen as unacceptable by the colonists. The English colonies also set up laws for themselves and punishments for people who broke those laws. If you remember from our last episode, the Puritans based their laws on their religion, and the punishments were often very harsh. In previous episodes, we started to discuss the slave trade and slavery in North America. Slavery in the colonies began in Virginia with tobacco planters. It spread throughout the North and the South. By the 1700s, slavery existed everywhere in the American colonies. However, in the northern colonies, colonists realized that it actually cost less to hire workers than it would to own slaves. However, because of the large plantations, slavery proved to be very profitable for the southern colonies, and it grew rapidly. As the demand for slaves grew, more West Africans were being packed onto ships and sent across the ocean. This voyage became known as the Middle Passage. The Middle Passage was a miserable experience. People were packed so closely together that they didn't even have any room to move. Many Africans died of sickness or despair. The ones who survived would be sold on auction blocks once they arrived to the Americas. And all at the same time, many colonial merchants became very wealthy selling their fellow human beings. Once the slaves were sold, they were expected to work very hard. Most slaves worked in fields growing crops, but others served or worked as nurses, servants, gardeners, amongst other jobs. Some slaves rebelled by refusing to do work or running away, but resistance was usually met with extreme violence. In our last episode, we talked a little bit about the Puritan church services. Attendance was mandatory, and houses were searched to make sure that nobody was skipping out on the services. Services could last up to 5 hours, and seats were assigned to make sure that the elderly got the best seats in the church. But, they were all old wooden seats, so I don't really know if they were getting that great of a deal. Anyway, during the 1730s, there was a religious revival called the Great Awakening. This uptick in religiosity spread throughout the colonies and had a powerful impact on the colonists. Education looked very different depending on what colonial region you lived in. In the southern colonies, families were spread out along the rivers. Therefore, there wasn't a good central location for schools. Wealthy families would hire tutors to educate their children at home. In the middle colonies, religious differences slowed down the growth of public schools because they couldn't agree on what religion to teach in schools. Many religious groups just created their own schools, but others just left it up to the parents. In the New England colonies, towns were required to have public schools. The Puritans supported education because they felt it was essential that every child be able to read the Bible. However, these public schools are not like public schools you see today. They were one-room buildings with no boards to write on. Pencils and papers were hard to come by, and there was only one book, the New England Primer, which was used to teach the alphabet, syllables, and prayer. Family life in the colonial era was a little different than today. Most men and women married very young, and families tended to be very large. Most families would have between 7 to 10 children. Many of these children would help do work around the family farm. families would often take in older relatives who could no longer take care of themselves. Because of all this, the family house was often crowded and a hectic place to live. That's going to conclude this history of history with Stevens. Before we go, I've got 2 more jokes for you all. Sponsored by Laffy Taffy. Laffy Taffy, I'm serious. Contact me, okay? Alright, first joke today. What is an owl's favorite subject? Algebra? Algebra, get it? Mr. Wright would appreciate that one.
Yahtzee.
Alright, second joke. In what month do people talk the least? It's a trick question. It's February because it's the shortest month. Alright, make sure you like, subscribe, share, leave a comment in the comments. Peace!